Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of my podcast on healing workplaces. Today, I'm bringing you into my research area on dark personalities in the workplace. I've been studying these individuals in the workplace for more than 10 years. I have a bit of a cold today. 'Tis the season, I guess. So I hope my voice is still okay for this episode. So let's start with how we study these individuals in the workplace and what we call personality disorders. So what are they? We know that personality is quite stable over time and that it does predict a lot of our behaviors and our thoughts. But on a clinical level, personality disorders are defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM, which is published by the American Psychiatric Association. This manual really provides a common language and clinical criteria for mental disorders. It is used by mental health professionals across the world. The goal of this episode is definitely not to start diagnosing everyone around you, that is for sure. And keep in mind that personality exists on a continuum of traits. But the DSM, the latest version, the DSM-5 TR, or the DSM-5, offers a general definition of what personality disorders are. So I'm quoting them: a personality disorder is an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from the expectations of the individual's culture, is pervasive and inflexible, has an onset in adolescence or early adulthood, and is stable over time and leads to distress or impairment. It is important to note that personality disorders are not related to mood, so to how you feel in a moment. They don't appear following a difficult life event. They're relatively stable throughout someone's lifespan. Now, in the context of this episode and in my research, clinical personality disorders will not be covered. Rather, what I will focus on is subclinical personality disorders, or subclinical constructs of personality disorders applied to the workplace. On subclinical levels, individuals present numerous traits of clinical personality disorders without necessarily being clinically recognized as having a personality disorders. But I think you need to keep in mind that some individuals who score really high on subclinical measures of dark personalities, for example, so the three personalities we're going to be talking about today, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, these individuals could also qualify for the clinical diagnosis. So you have individuals who could clinically who could score clinically as having narcissism or psychopathy, for example, and operate in workplaces. So let's start with the Dark Triad model of personality. The Dark Triad, or the notion of Dark Triad, is a concept that has been brought forward by Delroy Paulus and colleagues. He is a professor at the University of British Columbia in Canada. And he termed the concept, and it includes three dark personalities: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And the way that he describes these dark personalities is, and I'm quoting him here, the term dark personalities refers to a set of socially aversive traits in the subclinical range, not extreme enough to invite clinical or forensic attention. They can get along and even flourish in everyday work settings, scholastic settings, and the broader community. And more recently, Dr. Paulus has introduced a fourth dark personality in his Dark Triad model. So now he's naming it the Dark Tetrad model. And that personality is sadism. And I will say a few words about sadism after I present the first three personalities from the original Dark Triad model. So again, I will do more episodes on dark personalities for sure. And I will present more of the clinical aspects of, for example, narcissism and psychopathy. But for today, I will just brush a portrait of each of the three dark personalities, again, on a subclinical level. So let's start with narcissism. What are the traits or elements that make up narcissism? And one of the important elements that you need to remember is that each trait composing personality disorders exist on a continuum. And so you can have some of the traits, you can be low on some traits and high on others. The general personality exists on a continuum, but each of the traits do too. So the first one would be a grandiose sense of self-importance. I think grandiose sense of self-importance is different from having high self-confidence. In general, people would have high self-confidence not on every aspect of their lives. It'll be on some aspects. And if you ask them about it, they will give you facts. They will give you information as to why they think they are good at certain aspects or certain things in their lives. Whereas narcissists really believe that they are above others and very good, even excellent at everything that they do, and it's not backed up by facts. In fact, a lot of research has been done explaining that even when narcissists fail, they will still believe that they are the best, and they will blame others for their failures. The other element that composes narcissism is preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, beauty, or ideal love. Here you can add in their personal lives choosing a partner for what the partner can bring them. It's not about a partnership. It's really about, can they help with their careers or increase their level of wealth, for example. They will not hesitate to take advantage of others in their lives and in the workplace. They are highly manipulative. They have a high need for admiration. They love being admired by others. They score very low on empathy, which makes it easier to take advantage of or to pass others' work as their own. They have a high sense of entitlement, and they are very arrogant. They lack humility. So that's a general portrait of narcissism. Again, I will do an episode on narcissism in the workplace. Continuing with the Dark Triad, the second one I will present is Machiavellianism. Machiavellianism is the manipulative personality. Machiavellians are not as impulsive as narcissists and psychopaths can be, which allows them to conduct schemes on a longer period of time before they get caught. And they're not as flamboyant either as narcissists and psychopaths. Machiavellianism has been termed that way. The origin is a book that was written by Niccolo Machiavelli for politicians. And from that book comes the saying, the end justifies the means. So I think that really wraps it up, and it really in one sentence explains what Machiavellianism is about. So some of the traits composing Machiavellianism, they are cold and manipulative, of course, insincere and callous. They have a relative lack of affect in their interpersonal relationships. They lack concern with conventional morality. I guess that is true for the other two personalities also. They are motivated by selfish goals: sex, money, power, competition, social status. Winning at all costs is important to them. And they also present low empathy and low emotional intelligence. Third personality, psychopathy. Psychopaths are pathological liars. They lie for everything and anything. And it's hard for them to see the difference between their lies and the truth, between right and wrong. They are manipulators, also very good at manipulating. They have a grandiose sense of their own importance, like narcissists have. They will definitely use others to achieve their goals. They are highly impulsive. Their crimes are very impulsive in nature. They have a high need for constant stimulation. They absolutely thrive in chaos, and they love creating chaos, which, creates a lot of anxiety for people around them. But they don't feel that anxiety. Actually, psychopaths, and that's one difference between psychopaths and the other two personalities that compose the Dark Triad, is that brain scans for psychopaths have shown us that they have an actual inability to experience a number of human emotions, such as empathy, sadness, remorse, and guilt. And that makes it all the more easier for them to abuse others in the workplace and in society in general, and in their personal lives. One of the components of psychopathy is also aggressiveness and antisocial behavior. Now, when psychopathy is studied in society in general, we'll look at antisocial behavior such as gang, related violence or physical violence or other types of crime. I've been studying corporate psychopaths, and so we're looking more at corporate fraud in terms of antisocial behavior. So corporate fraud, harassment, discrimination in the workplace. But again, I'll do an episode specifically on corporate psychopathy. So a lot of people are interchangeably using the term psychopathy or psychopath and sociopath, when they are actually two different concepts. They're both personality disorders. And I will not get into the difference today, but I will in a future episode on corporate psychopathy, where I'll present Robert Hare's model of psychopathy, and I will be able to compare with the clinical elements or diagnosis for antisocial personality disorder. So, of the constructs that comprise the Dark Triad, research has indicated that psychopathy is the most dishonest, treacherous, and destructive of the three personalities. Psychopaths have been termed human predators, and it was long thought that psychopathic individuals were only present in prison systems, and that is why it was very hard for us to publish in academic journals on corporate psychopathy when we first started studying it, because we were getting a lot of rejections for our papers from business journals saying we don't cover that topic. Now, of course, with time, people have accepted the Dark Triad model within workplaces, but it is a fairly recent line of research. And a lot of people thought that they were hardened criminals who spent their lives in prison serving time for crimes, when they also thrive in many types of workplaces. So, a quick word on the Dark Tetrad and the fourth personality, sadism. Sadism, or everyday sadism, which is the subclinical term, refers to experiencing pleasure in seeing others suffering or inflicting suffering on others. Sadistic individuals enjoy cruelty, and they seek opportunities to induce suffering in others. In a study, they found that sadism was an independent predictor of behavior conveying an appetite for cruelty, which is a unique contribution of this personality to the Dark Tetrad. Now, Some studies have started to show that the appetite for cruelty could also be predicted by psychopathy, but I won't get into that today. Maybe I'll do an episode on differentiating the dark triad personalities later on. Regarding the dark triad, in studying the three personalities that make up the dark triad, Wallace and Williams have explained that although they have diverse origins, the personalities composing the dark triad share a number of features. To varying degrees, all three entail a socially malevolent character with behavior tendencies towards self-promotion, emotional coldness, duplicity, and aggressiveness. So they do have a common core. However, the authors say that their data and the data of others do not support the idea that these personality constructs are equivalent, or that one is merely a more severe form of the other, but know that all four actually are associated with harm to others. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering, personality disorders or dark personalities. Is it nature? Is it more nurture? In short, the research on genetic and environmental causes of personality suggests that genetics plays a large and even a larger role in explaining personality than environment does. That said, once a person is given, let's say, a particular personality structure, the environment will influence how this individual will process stimuli and how the traits linked to the personality develop and adapt over time. Now, we know that personality remains relatively stable over the course of our lives, and there are reports that approximately 50 to 60% of our personality traits are inherited, and that is true also for dark triad personalities. And so they found that psychopathy and narcissism had a moderate to large genetic component, but that the genetic factors played a smaller role in explaining Machiavellianism, and that Machiavellianism was more strongly influenced by shared environmental factors than it was by genetic factors. So there are differences there too. In terms of prevalence, we know that for psychopathy in the community, the prevalence is estimated to be around or less than 1%, while prevalence in correctional populations is about 15% for female offenders and 25 to 30% for men. I know of only one study that used the psychopathy checklist revised. That's the hair model, which is a measure that is used worldwide to assess psychopathy in the general population and in correctional or clinical settings. And the authors of that study have used the PCLR, the psychopathy checklist, in a sample of upper management. And what they found was that 3.9% of the sample had scored at the clinical level for psychopathy. So they found a higher prevalence of clinical psychopathy in these individuals than in the general population. As for narcissism, the lifetime prevalence rate of narcissistic personality disorder, the clinical disorder, is approximately 0.5 to 1%. In clinical settings, though, we'll find from 2 to 16%, and about 75% of individuals diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorders are men. There was a study in the general population that found a lifetime of narcissistic personality disorder among institutionalized adults in the US. That was about 6%. So it is difficult to measure the prevalence for Machiavellianism, because Machiavellianism, it does not have a cutoff score like narcissism or psychopathy. Both of those personality disorders have a clinical measure and a cutoff score, but Machiavellian doesn't. So it is very hard to measure its prevalence in different populations. For all three dark triad personalities and in all types of settings, women score significantly lower than men. Now, in the business world, Robert Hare, the author of the PCLR, has appeared in a Canadian documentary called The Corporation, where he linked major corporations using his measure of psychopathy, and he concluded that corporations are attractive to corporate psychopaths partly because these corporations exhibit psychopathic traits. For example, he notes that corporations, like psychopaths, spend a lot of time and resources creating superficial images, and some manipulate to influence others' behaviors and opinions. Like psychopaths, a number of corporations lack empathy and remorse and risk others or the well-being of their employees for their own benefit, such as achieving their corporate goals, and fail to take responsibility for unethical or potentially criminal actions. A similar analysis could be, I think, applied using narcissistic and Machiavellianism traits. I understand that you can't diagnose an organization or using a clinical personality measure, but it's still very interesting to see how corporation fit the image that some of those dark personalities present. This podcast is on toxic workplaces. And unsurprisingly, these organizations tend to hire leaders whose values and profiles align with their own, and they are at an increased risk of hiring individuals presenting one of the dark triad personalities. Now, we know that job seekers are drawn to organizations that align with their values, and individuals with dark personality traits are attracted to money, fame, and power, and they also prefer to operate in environments where rules and regulations are not clearly defined. And so there will be more on that in the next episode, but that would explain how certain types of organizations attract individuals that fit with with their image and with their values. So what do we know about individuals presenting a dark triad personality traits in the workplace? We know first that most selection processes are positively biased towards candidates presenting the dark triad personalities. Their charisma, their charm, their extroversion, their grandiose promises are definitely introducing positive biases and make them ideal quote unquote candidates for a lot of organizations. But what we know is that all three personalities are at the root of toxic behaviors within workplaces, such as corporate fraud, harassment, incivility, and discrimination. And although they are favored as leaders because they definitely look the part, especially in those types of profit first toxic organizations, they are associated with many forms of toxic leadership that have been termed throughout the years autocratic leadership, dictatorial leadership, abusive leadership, or tyrannical leadership. As leaders, these individuals have detrimental effects on their employees' mental and physical health. I remember an employee writing me on LinkedIn and telling me that They were in a very toxic workplace under a lot of stress from a very highly abusive supervisor, and the employee had been struggling with mental and physical health problems, and they had had a heart attack. And as they were in the hospital waiting to do tests for their heart, they actually saw another employee, part of their team, who had the same boss waiting to do some cardiac tests. And they both spoke about how the workplace had a huge impact on their mental and physical health, introducing so much stress. So these leaders create highly toxic and stressful work environments, and they cause higher rates of absenteeism, for burnout, for physical problems, and also lower productivity and higher employee turnover. Now, in the next episode, I will dive in more detail into how these individuals manage to enter organizations and what can be done to reduce the risk of hiring them. And as I was saying, personality is on a continuum, and each trait composing personality disorders is on a continuum as well. And the goal of this episode and all of the episodes that I'll be doing on personality disorders is never to diagnose people around you, but to really shed light on these personalities and the harmful impact that they can have on you, on workplaces, and help you gain a better understanding and find ways to protect yourself if you are working with someone who fits that profile. So thank you for being here today, for spending this time with me. And I hope that this episode helped some of you. And I will do many more on the impact that these individuals can have on you and on workplaces in general. Until next time, take good care of yourself and the people around you. Bye-bye.